Welcome everyone to this week's episode of Founders Unfiltered. Today we have our very own Aviral Bhatnagar as our guest on this episode, and I'm really excited about this one. We're going to go through his full journey, his full story, building a junior VC, his career in venture capital. So Aviral, let's get started. You know, we've all watched the documentary on Kota Academies, and JE, I mean, it must have been a crazy time.
Yeah.
What was it like for you? Is that like what was that whole process like, preparing for those exams and going through it?
Sure. No, it's awesome to be back as a guest. I think the first time I did this was when we did the Slack AMA.
Yeah.
We are what, 50? How many episodes are we in now on the podcast?
I think we've done 52. This will be 53, something like
Wow.
that. 50 episodes.
Wow.
2 years doing this.
2 years. Amazing, man. I mean, like it's a very good time, and I think we've been planning this for a while.
Yeah. Finally happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start at the beginning. My family is from Kanpur, very unique parents. Both met at IIT Kanpur, and I think a lot of people who know me know that story. But it's a good one. Got brought up in a very, I would say, curiosity-driven kind of environment, and I feel like those first 10 years were extremely important. So we had a computer before we had a car in 1994, 5, right? And I think at that time, a computer cost more or as much as a car, right? And I'm like giving this example. So my parents' priorities, obviously, as you can see, were were that. So I remember very vaguely doing something with the turtle game. I don't know if you remember. It was called Logo. It was just up, down, left, right. I was a kid, probably 4 or 5. I even remember stories from my parents where I put their credit card into the floppy drive and stuff. So, so a lot of mad stuff. The other thing that they brought into my life was books. Another story which my mom's super proud of. I don't know if I should be, but when I was 2 or 3, they got me a book, and I would be read the book by my mother, and then I would memorize the whole thing, and I would even remember like which word was at which page. I was not reading. I had essentially memorized the story and the page flipping. So anyone would see me, they were like, this child is crazy, he can read books at 2 or 3. I was just like from memory rote learning. So books, another love that started from there. And finally, you know, I know a lot of kids today play with Lego, but then again, it was very far ahead of its time. This is India in the like mid 90s, right? So very hard to get, but my dad would get it from the US, or, you know, in Bombay, there was one store in South Bombay, super expensive. Again, you know, parents invested in all that stuff. So growing up, this was the kind of, you know, structure I had. Learned English as my first language. Found it very hard to speak in Hindi. When we moved to Kanpur briefly, I was like, what are these people talking? I didn't get it. So I learned Hindi second. And then I came back to Pune. So been here for almost my whole life. Went to school here. I honestly like wanted to be a archaeologist or a historian when I was
in school, when you're in school.
Yeah. But then I think by 8th or 9th, I realized that that's not a viable option in India at all. Like, I didn't know anybody who was an archaeologist or a historian. I mean, I loved reading history, and, you know, another fun fact is that I know all countries and capitals, and much more random stuff about them. So any trivia you want about any random country, I can give. And I was like making Excel sheets of countries and capitals. I still have it. It's, I don't know, 20 years old, when I was probably 7, 8. So all this love I had, but I generally liked everything. And I hated physics. So I was like, what am I going to do?
Physics,
And
though,
then,
specific.
yeah.
Physics.
Physics specifically, I didn't like. And I ended up doing one equation of motion,
Okay.
where it's the relationship between displacement, time, and velocity, right? For the engineers, I'm sure they'll understand S is equal to ut plus half at square. And the S came negative, and I was like, distance negative थोड़ी होता है. And then I realized, oh, this is not distance, it's displacement, and displacement is from a position like 0 per niche. Right? It was a very simple problem. I realized that this is a very beautiful subject. I think I've been taught wrong. So I went like super deep, and I found it like really interesting. So from hating physics, I ended up loving physics in the span of a year in my 10th. I was like, okay, I want to do science. Now, for me, like the IITs were not, a lot of people, it's this Mecca and, the place to be. And obviously, I mean, I understand because it's a huge elevation from wherever you are. They're very premier colleges. But, I'd been to IIT Kanpur so many times, it was like, okay, it's my college of my parents, right, in some sense. And I never really took much pressure. So I never went to quota or any of this stuff. I was in Pune. In fact, didn't even go to a coaching class. And not that my parents taught me, I just learned by myself what to pick up where, and start studying. I think I really ramped up in 12th and, studied decently hard. Got into IIT Bombay, ended up taking engineering physics. Like I said, I hated physics. So this life came full circle.
Yeah.
So that's my story till college, I think. Yeah.
And then college was another phase. I'm sure we've had so many founders on the show that talk so fondly about their days in college and the impact they had on their careers. So, and I believe you actually started writing on Quora while you were in college itself.
Correct. That's true. That's true. So again, physics, big interest area. First year end, I went and did an internship at Ludvika in Sweden.
Okay.
And I was sitting behind like a computer and running models. I was like, boss, this is not what I want to do.
But it's Sweden, I mean.
Yeah. And then in the same year, I did this startup actually. I don't know, not a lot of people know, but yeah. So it was an educational magazine. This is back in, I think, 2012.
Okay.
When there was no internet penetration in India. Obviously, the internet was there. I had it in college, but it was not ubiquitous. Getting it on the phone was like super slow. It was almost like dial-up, right? So on the phone, not obviously on LAN. And the idea that we had was we'll take this magazine and democratize access to career opportunities.
Okay.
And the value prop was that people in Bombay know that you can be a Rubik's Cube solver, or you can be a historian, or you can be a scientist. Something, these are, I would say, a little non-linear career paths, apart from engineering and being a doctor, which still is quite predominant, even then was very important. And if you go to cities like Bhopal, which have paying capacity, but not the exposure, we wanted to solve this, right? That was the value prop. Actually, it did quite well. We created this magazine. It was entirely like pulled from our network of friends and students, because we had gone a little ahead in our careers, we would say in second, third year. They were, it was directed at K-12. It was a big hit in Bhopal. We pitched this at Eureka, which was a business plan competition in IIT Bombay. Actually, it's Asia's largest, according to them. I cannot verify it, but there were a lot of people. And we ended up winning it. We came first. And I was like, wow, okay. I was exhilarating, right? I mean, we're making money and things like that. I mean, the most senior folks in the team, they were 3-4 years. I was actually the youngest. So they were just graduating. One of them got into BCG, the other got into Bain, and then all the story was put to the side. So it went into cold storage. But it was my first brush with business. I was like, boss, this is damn exciting. Maybe this is what I want to do. So that's where the seed kind of like, I think for business startups got seeded. Same time, I was writing on Quora, and in fact, this magazine happened because I was literary focused. I was writing in college, writing on Quora, bunch of things like that. Um, and the whole reason why I started writing was, and it's been a constant theme in my life, um, is that I wanted to demystify what I was doing, right? At that point, it was the IITs. I was very appalled to find what people thought about IITians. It was completely wrong. That these guys are nerds and they don't know anything. Like for me, I hardly studied, right? So I was like, this guy doesn't even realize that there are people like me, which is the majority, right? So I just went with that mindset that, hey, I want to create the right narrative versus listening to some false narrative which is there. um, and it came from that place, but then it gradually evolved into helping people understand things. But that was the origin, and that's like a constant theme because I've been lucky and unlucky to be part of a minority at all times. Minority meaning very few IITians are there, or very few people go to the IIM ABC or into VC, right? So if there is a group of people which is limited in number and does not speak, there's a vacuum around them which gets filled by others, right? So I was like, let me not let that happen. So I wrote on Quora, thought I'd do consulting for a few years. Um, just give me a sec.
Yep.
So I thought I'll get into consulting straight out of college.
This was your second year, around your second year.
Like third year. Straight out of college, I thought I'll, get into consulting, but there was also this idea that I wanted to do my MBA.
Okay.
And most people in the, in the IITs, especially those who have, as I said, I wasn't focused that much on studying. It wasn't like my grades were bad, but they were not like top tier. But if you looked at my CV, I had done a ton of stuff. Like I was a national quiz winner. I'd represented India internationally. I had this business plan competition that I'd won as a startup. I was the head of literary arts in college, which was a big deal. So my CV was very good for consulting. I ended up getting pretty much a lot of shortlists. But, somewhere in that, third to fourth year bit, I realized possibly going to the US for an MBA might be the wrong idea. And at that time, it seemed very contrarian. Again, another theme in my life, which is taking these steps that are a little, I would say, offbeat. I know like IIT, nobody can say is offbeat, but it's very hard to get in. So you have to do offbeat things to get there. Same with IMA and same with PC and stuff like that. So I realized that maybe there is a lot of potential in this country, and this is back in 2013, right? And I remember I used to read a lot, but there was this very compelling argument which said, look at the population of continents in 2050, and you have 1 billion in Europe, 1 billion in the Americas, 4 billion in Africa, and 5 billion in Asia, right? Yeah. And money follows consumption eventually, which you are seeing in every way, right? So I'm like, where would I want to be in 20 years? Which country? And the answer was very clear. The answer was India, right?
It's not, it's a difficult thing to do, right? Like, I mean, there are two things here. I mean, first, it's going against the beaten path and doing what's tested, but it's also, a lot of people have these convictions. I know I've had them many points in my life, but to actually follow through on it and
yeah, it was very hard. So you're absolutely right. I'm still young, but I was much younger then. And like for a, I would say 20, 21-year-old to have that kind of conviction was a bit hard, to be honest. Especially at that age, you're so
Exactly.
easy
You
to
wanna,
influence.
yeah.
Like all my friends were, boss, तुम्हारा इस अच्छे consulting firm में हो गया है, you can go to Harvard. Why are you thinking of doing an Indian MBA? It's all the same. But I ended up rejecting my consulting offer and joining IMA and listening to my partner, who would have been my boss there, on a long tirade on why Indian business schools are passe and you should go to the US and etc. etc. Turns out he was from IIM Calcutta. So I don't know why he was. Maybe he was feeling sad I got into IIM. Just kidding. So I ended up going to IMA, and turned out to be the best decision of my life. Honestly, I loved it. I actually studied, ended up doing pretty well academically. Just before joining IMA, I had done another startup, and this one was called Function Space. Actually, the founder of Rupeek ran that startup. It was actually funded by Nexus. So
Okay.
I was like a 6-month temp employee intern. I don't know what I was. I was paid and I was doing growth hacking then.
In between your MBA.
Yeah, college and MBA. And I'm writing. I also started these 2 pages. One was IIT B Confessions, which went viral. So that was my first experience with like really crazy virality. The second was this blog called Give Up at IITB, which I did in my second year. So I have had these brushes with social media getting viral and things like that. So maybe I understood how to connect with people over writing and doing all these things. And again, constant theme. I think I ramped up Quora a lot in my second year at IMA. The first year is extremely hard, so you really don't get much time to do anything. But second year is like the opposite. You get a lot of time to do a lot of stuff. So I ramped up writing, got a lot of scale. I realized that this could be interesting, but I started getting recognized, and juniors from IMA would be like, we read your answers and things like that. So it was pretty good. In fact, people who get into IMA today also, which is, I don't know, 6 years after I wrote, refer to that answer. So it's an eternal solve. It seems like that, right? So it's good. And I did my internship in a private equity firm. I liked investing, but it was for very large assets like bridges and tolls, and I really couldn't build a connection with them. So I was like, I like investing and I like startups. Is there something that brings them two together? And that's how actually VC happened, right? Very naive logic, simple equation. Investing plus startups equal VC. And again, another contrarian decision led me there. So I mean, these seem maybe trivial to people who are outside, but when you're inside, they're not. It was almost like a given that you would go on exchange from campus at IMA in the 5th term. But I thought it makes no sense because you've come there to study. All I understood of exchange was that it's a glorified Euro trip. And why should I like spend an entire semester just justifying to myself that I'm going to Europe? So I was like, fine, let me just sit here and study. So fortunately or unfortunately, my semester got done quickly. And then like I had a couple of months to kill. So I was like, let me apply to some VC firms and figure out. I applied to one, which was Guild, for an internship, which is not summers and not formal. So it was like a winter internship that ended up happening. And funnily enough, after I did it, everyone after me started trying to do that. So there's a herd mentality, and like it's crazy in business school, right? So people start pinging me next year. They're like, "Hey, we're doing this." I'm like, "Where did you even hear of this?" Like, "Aapne kiya tha. We also want to do it." They didn't go on exchange for that reason. I'm like, "Boss, that was not my logic at all." So I ended up joining Guild, and they gave me an offer to join, and I was like, what the hell? This was not expected because I mean, I was pretty hot on the list for most consulting firms again. And as I had said, I wanted to do consulting and then get into venture. But eventually, I joke that I've done more case prep than a lot of people who spent years at these firms, and I never stayed there for a single day. So yeah, I ended up in VC. That's how I got in. That was how I entered venture.
With the internship, and then you converted it. And
Yeah.
I want to dive a bit into that because I think, like you said, VC specifically is something that a lot of people are curious about, maybe don't fully understand. But when you join a VC firm first as an intern, what is your day-to-day? What do you do exactly?
Yeah, I think I'll answer that as we speak. I'll first talk about the negatives of venture.
Okay.
It's an extremely niche job. There are no exit options except becoming a founder. That's the only thing you can do.
You can do anytime, right? It's not really an exit.
Yeah, and the third thing is you basically just stop wanting to work in large organizations. Right? I mean, it's a very, like, most folks in my batch or people who I know, they're so commitment phobic. This funny thing that consulting firms tend to propagate is that you join us and there'll be a lot of exit options. It seems amazing when you're a young, like, easy to be influenced student. But if you just think about it, they're saying join us because we are a great place to leave. And why would anyone sell that to you? But clearly they do. So
it worked on me. So
so it worked on you. It's an amazing sales pitch, right? Because folks who go to colleges like this, and I'm not like removing myself, I'm just saying that you are extremely ambitious and insecure, right? So you have these overachievers who are extremely ambitious, also insecure, so they go with the herd and they don't want to be decisive, right? So they take like years. I'm not saying these firms are not good or anything. I just feel like either an MBA or a consulting firm, they're kind of replaceable. Once you've done an MBA, perhaps there's little utility there. Again, my biased opinion, possibly. So those are the challenges with venture. And it requires a lot of patience and commitment to actually feel like you've ended up doing something, versus an operating role or a consulting role, which are, I would say, more day-to-day, hands-on. They take time. Venture is a game of patience. So those are the things that you should consider, and maybe a lot of people told me at that time as well, why VC, man? You're going to kill yourself. So but here I am 6 years later, alive and kicking.
And hopefully that patience is starting to pay off, and you're definitely seeing the fruits of it. I mean, before we move on with the venture piece, I do want to talk a bit about AJVC and where that fits into your story. You started that when exactly? Was it right after you graduated? Or?
No. So it's very tied into the VC piece, so we can like talk through it together.
Yeah.
There's no problem. So I started as a junior guy, and I always want to be a junior guy at heart, which is why a junior VC. If people can ask me, you're a senior VC now, why are you a junior VC? I'm like, I'll always be a junior VC. It's okay. But I think 1.5 years into my role, I was helping set up a seed fund, and they didn't really have much of a presence in India. So it was on me to like hustle and get deal flow. And I was like,
how do you do that?
How do I do that, right? Now, the funny thing was, when I was on Quora, there's this other guy on Quora who now I think more people know. Gaurav Munjal used to write on Quora with Roman Saini. And they were starting this little YouTube channel called An Academy. And Gaurav messaged me on Quora saying, hey, dude, do you want to become a teacher?
Oh,
or an educator, right? Just because it was all part-time stuff, right? You have a job and I just got into VC and I'm like, let me be smart. And I'm like, hey, do you have a pitch deck? Are you raising money? And he actually was. We didn't end up investing in obviously big and deep portfolio. I didn't have anything to do with that because I was literally like probably a month into my job. So I didn't really have much of an idea of what an investment is and things like that. But still, it's an important story because I realized the power of media in the venture world, right? Maybe somewhere that, kind of clicked. And I was like, hey, this probably is an interesting way to meet founders at scale, right? And that idea kind of remained in my head in some way. Um, I continued to write on Quora. So, I'd written about IITs, IIMs, and I slowly started writing about startups. Again, like I said, small group of people. I am in the VC ecosystem. Somebody asked me, hey, dude, you're a VC, although I'm just like a year old into venture. Swiggy is such a big loss making company. Why are idiot VCs funding it? It's an angry question, but it's a relevant question, right? Why? Right? Are they dumb? Are they high? What the hell is going on? And I was like, maybe there is something here, right? And then I looked, and no investor is actually talking about it.
yeah.
You'd either have like fact kind of publications, or you'll have publications that are little, I would say, sensational in some manner. And there was no opinion that is, I would say, balanced and
Yeah, you
wholesome.
just see the headlines, right?
Just headlines, right? So,
Yeah.
so all this thought process is, somewhere in my head. I continue to write answers on Quora. It's got great distribution, but I started seeing that it was getting a little, crappy in terms of content and the questions I was getting asked. So
Okay.
I was like, I was on LinkedIn. I had started writing a little bit. I wasn't getting as much traction as Quora. I'd probably get like 30, 40, 50 likes. While on Quora, I would get,
Yeah.
500,000 upwards, things like that. So I just like wrote something on Zomato, I remember, and then I pasted it on LinkedIn, the same thing. I just blew up. Like it was on Zomato Gold, and people are like,
Answering this question that
yeah, I
you're
just posted it. And I'm like, dude, the people are like, oh, okay, this is amazing. Who's this guy? Right. So I'm like, there is some interest and intent here as well on LinkedIn. And that was 2017, 18, right? So all these things are happening together. And I'm like, I'm a junior VC. Let me start a blog on Quora just to test it out, right? So I started a blog called Life of a Junior VC. You can still find it. And as they say in the Facebook, they dropped so the life of got dropped. So Life of a Junior VC was essentially reads that I found interesting, curated, and I would just like share the answers I would write about startups in that blog. That's it, right? And then it grew slowly because I had some distribution. I think I'd gone to 60, 70,000 followers on Quora. And I had like maybe 900 to 1,000 followers on the blog because it was one subsection of my base.
Yeah.
And then, that time this thing called newsletters had started to, pick up. And then somebody said, hey, Aviral, you should start a newsletter. I'm like, maybe this is cool. Let me do it. So the first newsletter of Life of a Junior VC is going to go out. I start a form on my blog on Quora, and 20 people sign up, and I'm like, wow, people are giving me their email IDs, man. This is amazing. So that's where a junior VC starts. I would say, I think April 3rd, April 4th, 2018. That's the first newsletter. Whichever Sunday was there in the first week. I don't remember exactly. I'll have to check.
And I don't think you've missed a Sunday since.
Yeah, never. So initially it was weekly.
Yeah.
After that, as you know, we've become fortnightly. But Junior VC started like that. It was a reads again, but because it was a newsletter, I could do some more with it. So I started adding some commentary about what's happening in the world of tech and very, very small stuff. It was not, fancy. And you can go back to the blog and see me, the first post, you'll see it, right? It's just some random using on Facebook or biotech and random stuff. Um, and then I realized that I have this real estate and this follower base it was nowhere except people who had subscribed. And it just organically started growing. People forwarded it, and slowly it was 100, then 200, 300. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I started experimenting with a few things, like writing a post on LinkedIn and then in the comments putting subscribe to my newsletter, right? First guy to do it. A lot of people do it now, but I know I started that trend. Um, so people started signing up, and I had this real estate, and I was like, can I do more? So I said, hey, what if I pick up a startup and just talk about it, right? So I started writing these short paragraphs, and they became longer and longer and longer, and then suddenly the reads were a small section. And if you see the AJVC newsletter right now, the reads are not there, right? That's how product iterations and pivots happen.
Yeah.
I think we dropped the reads maybe a year and a half ago. I was fine. I mean, because we had so many started to build products that it was getting a little clunky. Um, so yeah, this newsletter is going. Again, there's no place on earth you can find it except someone else or the subscribe link. And people were like now almost begging me, saying, "Boss, please have a website. We can't find this anywhere, right?"
Yeah.
And, this US 12 admin.mailchimp link is it just doesn't work, right? So I think maybe 20, 25 editions in, I'm like, my work's ramping up. People are saying there's a need of a website. I don't have bandwidth. So I do this Hail Mary and I'm like to my reader base saying, hey, we want to have some folks volunteer. Can you help? And 100 people replied out of 1,000 people subscriber base.
10% of your
Yeah,
subscribers.
I was like, this is a super intense group, right? And I spoke to a lot of people, and then the Keshav, Saloni, Shiraz, Abhinav, the first four, right? Uh,
Was so to say.
except Saloni, they're still there, all of them
Yeah.
from day one. So, they end up joining, and how we would do it is we would just have the piece, the story. We would have the editor, which is me. Abhinav was the visuals design guy, and Shiraz, Saloni, and Keshav, they would pick up one piece of, and you still see that pattern, right? It's there to
It's very much the same structure. It's just
team has the same structure because it's very efficient, right? That's what we realized.
Yeah.
So we would, split the piece. We would, that's how we would kind of structure it, and that's how it started. I think that's how AJVC got kicked off.
Amazing. And now to flip back over to the professional side and your work as a VC, of course, starting AJVC and talking about startups, your deal must have improved drastically.
Right.
How did that impact you in your career, and how did you kind of progress?
Yeah, I think I seem to enjoy VC so much that I do it all day long, every day of the week, right? Weekends. Like honestly, a junior VC is also VC, right? It's not different. I think the startup ecosystem is so interesting. You can do so much. So they kind of, I would say, reinforce each other in a very symbiotic way. It's helpful for the firms I work with, and similarly, AJVC is also helped by my being a VC, right? So I ended up making connections with a variety of founders, many of whom I'd never worked with in a professional capacity necessarily, right?
Do you have
Uh,
any specific stories of founders that we might have heard of today that you
yeah,
connect?
yeah. In fact, there was this little company called Misho that when I was doing it alone, I written about. I think they just raised their B, and I was like, this is going to take e-commerce by storm, right? And got in touch with it, pinged me, and then we just on and off started chatting, and then I think over time we've become friends. And it's a good thing he's also a venture highway portfolio, but that was not the beginning. So that's like one story, and there are like tons of it. I think over time it's just increased. But because of my writing and these connections that I had, they just kept like snowballing, this compounding effect, right? And I talked about the LinkedIn switch. So I moved from Quora, started writing more LinkedIn, and then I ramped up like crazy. I don't know, went super fast from 0 to 100K. I took 6 years to get to 60K. I took 1 year to get to 100K, probably because that's how compounding works.
Yeah. And also there was an element of you understanding what people want to hear and how to write.
Correct. So that PMF had like started kicking in, right? And you know the job started to get a lot more interesting, and I think these things got reinforced because I've always been a seed investor. So I ended up meeting like thousands of founders a year. Very enriching. I learned how to evaluate companies, evaluate people, evaluate markets, right? And if you want to talk about what actually a VC does, which was life of a junior VC, you look at it in three buckets majorly. The first is um, getting people to speak to, right? So I call it sourcing.
Yeah.
Um, the second is evaluating them and
Okay.
also building views on markets and teams. And the third is actually helping them if you invest, right? So sourcing, diligence, portfolio management, right?
Right.
And I would say every VC at any point of their career is doing all three.
Okay.
The percentage changes. Like if you're more junior, you do more. I would say just sourcing stuff. As you grow, you do sourcing, diligence, portfolio. It becomes more like an equal balance, right? But you never stop doing any of the three, right? And the hierarchy is how it helps, right? As you become more senior, you see more filtered stuff. That's all.
Yeah, you have a
That's
filter.
all. You're not the first port of call. Like I am not the first port of call for many founders, but some I am because they might be fast moving or they're people I know, etc., right?
Got it.
So it's very loose. I think VC as a job is very much like an apprenticeship. There's no set structure and process, and everyone can come up with their own mechanism to actually invest. There's no right or wrong. At the end of the day, your returns matter, and the process you have come at to get these returns, that's what matters, right? That's the playbook. So as a VC, you have a hypothesis, say that I believe what I like. Seed stage investing is really hard. Finding alpha in seed is probably where you make the most amount of impact. And that's what I want to do, and that's how I want to operate as a VC. That's my edge. I want to be a generalist seed only fund, for example, right? Which is both the funds I worked at, they've always been seed only dedicated. And I think seed is probably the hardest stage because there's absolutely nothing. It's just a market and a team and maybe not even a product, right? Just idea, and a lot of promise. So evaluating there is sometimes like really challenging. You might meet a founder who's really raw in one call, and the next call you might be talking to someone who's going to build a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
It can happen, right? It's so there's so much noise and variance in seed. So I think in venture, that's what becomes important, your process and how you follow through, how you meet people. things like that. And it's, as I said earlier, the patience game is it's the hardest, right? You get into a company. The sad and maybe the interesting part about VC is your bad companies, you know them first. They say lemons ripen early or sour early, whatever, you get the drift, right? So your good ones, you won't know. I mean, you'll know that this could be good, but you don't know how big it can be, right? And the bad ones, like in 1.5 years, they're gone, right? They're over. They don't have runway. So it's a game of patience, and you learn the seed in this and seed investing. And I think in my first 3-4 years, the fund I worked at, Guild, it was very curated in the way they would invest. In fact, I would say it's like a PE style VC model. So I got a lot of exposure to operating, right? I would actually almost be parachuted as a co-founder with a lot of these companies. Now I was very young, and some of them were middling successes, but nothing's really broken out necessarily. But I learned a ton. I learned a lot. I learned about venture. I learned about seed. I learned about founders. I met so many companies.
Run a company and actually having a parachute in. And
So that was, and that that model works. In the US at least, Guild super successful, really under the radar. Like my ex-boss, you won't find anything on him online except his pocket square and a photo, and not even his face. But his model was, hey, we'll find these interesting niches that are not covered by Silicon Valley, geographically as well as sectorally. We'll get in at really attractive prices. We'll help hire the core team and then scale it, right? And it's a very hands-on kind of almost artisanal venture model, but it works really well, like supremely successful, I would say, in the investment that have been done. So that's the kind of model.
You're looking at different kind of companies here, right? Just help me understand that a bit better. You're looking at companies that won't have like 1000x growth, but maybe are like 10 or 100x, right? I mean, is there? Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's always a question of outcome size, right? So if you have to look at the math of venture, you have to say, what do I need to do in this company to return my fund? That's the math we always use back of the envelope. Not all will return funds, but if they can't, then you're screwed. You get the point, right? But you need a multi-bagger in your portfolio. And if you don't take that lens with every company you invest in, then you'll never have a multi-bagger, right? So now I'll contrast it a little bit between the two models, right? There's one model where you take a lot of ownership, you put in capital, team, a lot of effort, right? So let's say and this is like super normal in VC, but if you have there are funds that have 30% of a company, right? If you have 30% of a company, and let's say after 3-4, it's a very capital efficient business, which is what Guild used to do. Always 2 or 3 rounds mein ho jana chahiye, 1-2 round mein ho jana chahiye, you should, right? So let's assume you have like 20% dilution, so it's you're left with 65%, right? So let's say 50% of the company, you have $100 million fund, and you need to return the fund, so you need a $500 million valuation, right? So you can return your fund with 500 million at a 30% with a capital efficient model, versus if you have a capital inefficient model, which is, it's not really inefficient, it's more like more R&D is required, more capital is required, you need to burn money, etc. Which means that there'll be a lot of rounds that will happen. So let's say you don't have 2, you have 4 or 5.
Each round more.
Right, each round 20, maybe it becomes 10. So assume you're left with 30% of what you invested in, what you had initially, right? And you would say VC firms get 15-20% in the first round. So let's say you have 5% or 6% of the company, right? And you again have $100 million fund.
You need a much bigger
2 billion outcome, right? This is the math. right? So if you're going after new markets, exploratory capital bahut chahiye, stuff, and you don't get ownership as well because they're competitive deals, they almost always go together, because the one founder who's chasing the large outcome is also going to be in a tough market, which will need a lot of capital. You will not be able to get allocation. So,
Yeah.
the founder dynamics gravitate there. Versus this kind of founder is not that, they're not ambitious, but they're not looking at these new exploratory markets. Maybe they're like consumer brands and stuff like that, which is what we used to do at Guild. It was just finding these consumer brands. So structurally, these markets, they enable this kind of stuff. And that's the math you do. That's how venture works. And I'm just like explaining with the spectrum. So that's your ownership. That's what you should invest. That's the math we do back of the envelope. And you can imagine, if you don't have $100 million fund, but you have $500 million fund,
It's just
then
that
what
much.
happens? You have $1 billion fund, what happens, right? And return compression is law of physics in financing. The larger your fund, the harder it is to get returns. As simple as that.
Which that's amazing. And so now you've moved from Guild to Venture Highway, I think about a year ago now.
Yeah, year and a half, I would say. Yeah.
And so Venture Highway, how are they different from Guild?
I would say like very different, very refreshing. Again, the whole I like both the models. They're both interesting. I think the VH model is, be seed focused, but we have to find these abnormally large outcomes, right? Because we're going after tech first, ops, maybe heavy businesses that are enabled or leveraged by tech. You can see examples like Meesho, Moglix, ShareChat, others, right? They need a lot of time to discover the business model, so they need money. Like I was saying, the other end of the spectrum. So we are in the unicorn hunting business now. We have to find unicorns. So the question I always ask is, can this be worth $1 billion or $2 billion? What I've actually asked is this fund math that I told you, right? If I own 5% of it and I have a $200 million fund or $100 million fund, I need a 2 to 4 billion outcome, right? So always asking these questions. And I think, it's very different in terms of speed, in terms of the kind of founders you'll work with. It's, I would say, a larger canvas, obviously, with more to do in terms of like building it out. And I've always,
I guess it's more, you have less unit economics look at. It's more just team and
yeah, absolutely. Let's look at just team and market. And I think I've always gravitated to small teams that are trying to build something new. I think with the background and the pedigree I have, I should be able to take these kind of bets, right? And VH is like a startup fund. I mean, not so much anymore, but still, I mean, it's a lot younger than most of the other franchises in India. And it's both challenging and interesting to be able to work hard and fight for deals, be competitive, and actually build something new from scratch in some sense, right? So that's always attracted me, and that's why I like these kind of small, high octane, high performing teams. I mean, in venture, every team is generally small, but even in venture, there is a small, right? there's a 40-member investment team, which is huge, and there's a 3-5-member investment team, which is small, which is what we are. So I like that small. I in fact think that the real seed cottage industry, which is like I was saying, art, science, it can't be a machinery. Like personally, that's what I feel. Again, venture is evolving very rapidly because startups are evolving. So you never know. But I think that, enabled with scale, which comes like capital, media, whatever. In fact, I think that the future of media is venture. In fact, you have a media company which gives money, which A16Z is or YC is, right? And I think that small teams which have that kind of leverage can do a ton. And that's how venture remains exciting and interesting.
And that's an incredible insight, thinking about YC as a media company first.
Yeah, they are a media company first. Same as Angel is too, right? So you look at all of these companies, they're all media companies first, and then they say, hey, you know what? Here, take
So
1
yeah, amazing. Thanks a lot. This was a lot of fun. I'm gonna wrap it up with the question that we ask all our guests, so you know what's coming.
I don't have an answer, dude, for that. What the hell? I thought you're not going to ask me.
I have to. I mean, anyways, you can take a few minutes to think about it. We can edit it. But I think this was almost all one take.
Yeah.
Incredible. This was great. Yeah, think about it.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this unfiltered advice I got. Actually, I think 1 or 2 years into my job, I was like, what am I doing? What else going on? A lot of my friends were, at these larger firms, all happening, flying in, flying out here, this, that. I'm like, I'm barely doing like 1 or 2 deals a year. And I talked to my boss, and he's like, how many years do you want to be in VC? Let's just do the math. So I'm like 15, 20 years. He's like, if you do 1 or 2 deals a year, how much is that? If it accumulates as a portfolio, I'm like 40. He's like, why don't you have patience? So, so I think that why don't you have patience was okay, yeah. So I think the unfiltered feedback that I got was you just don't need to say long term. You need to actually think and feel long term. And what does long term mean? It means that I should be able to think about what happens in the future for my life in the next 10-15 years at a macro level. And these are the things I want to achieve. Not specifics, large, very high macro. And I think he used the VC example, but I feel like a lot of people, especially when they're young, they're optimizing very short term. They'll think like money, they'll think,
it comes back to the whole consulting thing, right?
yeah, exactly. So consulting is a very short-term fix, right? And this long-term thing, it's so beautiful because I've seen it play out now in venture. I see what compounding means, right? What people forget, why I'm taking this example is because it triggered a lot of thoughts in my mind. I'll elaborate a little bit. What people forget with consulting is that the exit means you are restarting.
Yeah. You're doing something different, right? You have to.
And that's okay. But remember that as well, right? There's a cost. People forget. So this long term, it's like this, and then it just goes like that. The exponential compounding. So you should have the patience. You should have the grit, and you should trust yourself, despite what other people may be doing or saying. So I think the summary is unfiltered feedback. Don't just say that you're a long-term thinker, actually think long-term and think in every way, like whatever decision you make, especially when you are in a long-term partnership, relationship, anything in life, think, does this in this whole macro 10-15 years, is this a needle mover or not? If it is, then do it. If it's not, probably not worth it.
Just amazing. And I'll just end with one thing that I think I've learned from you is just seeing how important it is to be consistent. And I still think it's incredible. We have not missed a single podcast episode in 2 years, and not a single newsletter in almost 4 years.
Yes.
So yeah, I've seen that play out quite a bit.
Awesome.
So thank you everyone for tuning in.